Okay, so I talk a lot about reprogramming and rewiring your old habits and patterns around food. And if you've never caught one of my live broadcasts before, my name is Sarah Best. I am a nutritionist, but people like to joke that I'm the nutritionist who never talks about food. And that's because I really think that food's kind of the easy part, at least in my experience. The people, the clients that come to me, the students that join my programs, they know a lot about what to eat and not eat. Like they've read every book, they've done every diet, they've done all the shakes, they've done all the bars, they've done Weight Watchers, they're doing keto and paleo and intermittent fasting and all the things, right? They've tried everything. And, some of them work. Nothing against any of those programs. Some of them work really well if you do them, right? If you do them consistently, if you stick with it, if you stay on track. Where most people, in my experience, fall apart is they don't do it. They don't stay on track. They do really well all day, and then they end up sabotaging themselves at night. Or they do really well for a few days, and then they go crazy on the weekend, right? We all know this story. This was certainly my story. And I struggled with nighttime snacking, nighttime binging for a long time, even after I became a nutritionist. So it was certainly not due to a lack of information or knowledge about what to eat. And again, my experience with my clients and students is that that's generally their story as well. They don't lack information about what to eat. They just struggle with doing it consistently. So that's where, I sort of became obsessed with learning everything I could about what I really think is the missing piece of the puzzle. And that's what's going on up here, right? This old operating system, as I call it, in our brains that keeps us going back to our old habits and patterns, that makes it feel almost impossible to stick with, a new eating approach or a diet or whatever you're doing, even though it might work really well, even though you really do want to make the changes. It feels like this constant tug of war, like you're constantly fighting your own brain, right? Sound true? Give me a thumbs up if that sounds, give me some likes if you think that if this is resonating with you. Again, this was certainly my story, so I understand it and appreciate the frustration that comes along with that. So again, I am a nutritionist, but I really became obsessed with learning everything I could about this part of the puzzle, right? So food psychology, understanding how our thoughts and our feelings and our beliefs create our relationship with food, and just going under the surface and really getting to that root cause of what is really driving those old patterns and habits around food. How are habits formed and how can we change them? How do neurotransmitters like dopamine work in the brain when it comes to cravings, and how can we change that? How can we outsmart that? What are the tools and the strategies that we can put in place to really do this work of how I describe it as reprogramming and rewiring this part of the puzzle, so that making those healthy choices that we already know how to make, we already know what we should do, making that feel easy, feel automatic, feel natural, feel like a no-brainer, right? Require almost no thought because it's just naturally what you gravitate towards. Sound good? Sounds good and totally possible, just so you know. So, but again, I think we need to shift our focus from the food, from carbs and protein grams and keto and paleo and all the things. Again, not bashing any of those. A lot of them are useful tools. But when we just focus on that, we're missing the biggest piece of the puzzle, I think, which is what's going on up here. Because until you change this, your old habits and patterns, your old operating system, as I call it, is always going to drive the bus, and it's always going to end up sabotaging you and taking you back to your old ways, right? We all know this. We've all experienced this. Most of us are stuck currently in some iteration of this frustrating loop. So how do we get out of it? How do we reprogram and rewire that old operating system? What do we need to do so that we can take back control, so that we can feel like we're in control instead of the food being in control? Well, that's what I want to touch on a little bit today. So that old operating system, as I describe it, right up here, it's made up of a lot of different things, and I am in no way a neuroscientist, nor do I pretend to be on the internet. But a big part of what's going on up there is neural pathways. Okay, so every time you repeat a behavior, anytime you learn something new, your brain sets about creating neural pathways around that behavior. And this is how your brain sort of automates a lot of behaviors. This is why you don't have to think about how to brush your teeth or tie your shoes anymore, right? You learn those things once, you practice them a few times, enough times that neural pathways were formed in your brain, and now you do them automatically, right? You don't have to think about it. You just automatically brush your teeth. It would feel wrong not to brush your teeth, right? If you ever tried to go to bed without brushing your teeth, it just feels like, and the same thing has happened with our habits around food, right? We've created a deeply set network of neural pathways around our old relationships with food, around eating when we feel stressed, eating when we feel anxious, eating when we're bored, eating just as a way to sort of avoid uncomfortable feelings, eating because we're in a certain place, like we're sitting on the couch watching TV, eating because we're with a certain person, right? When I get together with my sister-in-law, this is what we do, right? A lot of people tell me that. Eating, just because you need a little something, right? Just to kind of fill the void, mindlessly snacking. These are all indications that you have neural pathways around those behaviors. Now, the great news is that what we know about neural pathways and what we know in terms of just the last maybe 5 or 10 years of study in terms of neuroscience is that the brain actually possesses this great ability, which we call neuroplasticity. Love that term because it describes the fact that your brain is actually, instead of being sort of fused, like the old belief was that by the time you were about 7, your brain was kind of fused into whatever it was going to be. And there was no changing it, and maybe you could learn, it was like, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, right? That was the belief for a long time. But what we know now in modern neuroscience is that with this idea of neuroplasticity, your brain actually is very good at breaking old neural pathways and creating new ones. Now, when I say breaking old neural pathways, what I really mean is they don't actually break, and this is why, even though sometimes we create new habits, we find ourselves often frustratingly still falling into old ones. And unfortunately, those old neural pathways are never going to go away entirely. So we're always going to be a little bit vulnerable to falling back into those old habits and patterns. But what we know is that we can, if we choose to deliberately, consciously, create new neural pathways around new, healthier habits and train our brain to like, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a minute, to like those new neural pathways more than the old ones. We can literally start to reprogram and rewire the way our brains think and feel and respond to food. So a few ways we can do this. I'm just going to share a few of them here today. I don't want to overwhelm you. But first of all, just practice, right? Your brain is happy to automate, to create neural pathways around, automate whatever you repeat. So all your brain has no sense of like good habits or bad habits. All your brain just likes habits in general. It's how it saves and preserves your energy, your conscious focus for tasks like potentially running away from tigers, should there be one, right? So your brain is always looking to be efficient and save energy. And one of the ways that it does that is by automating as many things as it possibly can. So anytime you repeat something several times, your brain's going to start to automate it. It's going to start to make that, just like the tying your shoes and the brushing your teeth, right? And your brain it doesn't distinguish between what we consider bad habits or good habits. Your brain doesn't have that filing system. It just likes creating habits about anything. It's how it works. So instead of fighting that, let's try and work with it. And let's start to create allow your brain to create habits around healthier behaviors. So sometimes what we do is we sort of try something, a new healthy habit that we want to bring into our lives. We try it once, twice, 3 times, and then it feels hard all those times. And so we just kind of give up and we say, oh, see, this isn't for me. I can't do this. I end up going back to my old ways. You have to kind of push through that, knowing now that you know that your brain will happily create neural pathways around that new, healthier behavior if you repeat it enough times. I want you to remember that and kind of push through that and keep repeating it. You have to repeat it many, many times, right? You didn't learn how to tie your shoes after doing it 3 times, right? As when we're teaching kids to tie their shoes, they have to keep practicing day after day, right? And eventually they get it. Eventually it becomes automatic. Eventually those neural pathways form and they don't have to think about it anymore. The same is true whether it's that you want to get to the gym more, make self-care a bigger priority, drink more water, meal prep on the weekends. Like you gotta push through and do it enough times. Hopefully now though, that knowing what's really going on up here in terms of the development of those neural pathways, it will get easier. It will get easier. I promise you, your brain will happily automate whatever behavior you practice enough. So just keep that in mind as you're doing the hard work of repeating those healthier habits. Okay. Second is, I'm always telling my students in my Change Your Brain, Change Your Body program that when you have a win, when because we're always celebrating wins in our group. And I'm a bit of a broken record by telling them that I really want them to absorb how good that feels. And this isn't just about yay me, although yay you, right? It's awesome. But I'm thinking about it from a reprogramming, rewiring perspective, right? When you make a choice that you're really proud of, and you take the time to sit in that feeling of how proud you feel, how in control you feel, how just on top of the world you feel, you just absorb that, let that sink into all your cells. What you're doing is you're training your brain to associate making that healthy choice with a really good feeling. And again, going back to neuroscience, because it's what I love, what we know is that your brain is hardwired to avoid pain and seek reward, right? Or pleasure. So your brain is always looking to do that, right? We're always looking to avoid pain and seek pleasure or reward. So the more we can, what people are often doing is they're thinking of their old habits, the unhealthy ones, as the reward, and the healthier habit, the going to the gym, the eating the vegetables, as pain, right? And this is never going to work because you're trying to work against your brain's natural wiring. Instead, you might have heard people say, I don't have to do this, I get to do this, right? Reframe it as I don't have to, I get to. It's a great idea because the more you can reframe those healthy choices as a reward, you're then working with your brain's natural wiring to make it more excited about the healthy choices. So again, one way we do this is by really absorbing those wins, really sitting in how good that feels. Take a few minutes. I always encourage this is my universal symbol for journaling. I always encourage my students to journal about this and just really write down. And again, this isn't about this. I mean, if it bothers you that you're like full of yourself or something, although I think you should own every win. But there's real neuroscience behind this. So I really want you to think about sitting with that win and really absorbing how good it feels, right? Think about how proud you feel. Think about how good it feels to feel proud of yourself. Think about how, again, that feeling of being in control, of making that hard choice. Just sit in how good that feels. Because again, what you're doing is you're rewiring your brain to associate the healthy choice with reward. This feels good, right? And your brain will always want to do what feels good. So create that new wiring by really absorbing those wins, okay? And finally, last thing I want to leave you with is think about your bigger why, your bigger vision, okay? Again, this continues on what I was just saying about making the healthy choices into a reward or pleasure. We can also do this by getting really clear on our why. What's the bigger vision that you have here? Why do you want to eat better? Why do you want to go to the gym? Why do you want to drink more water? Why do you want to eat more vegetables? And don't just leave it at, well, I want to lose 20 pounds or I want to have more energy. That's a great start, but why? Why do you want to lose 20 pounds? Why do you want to have more energy? What would you be able to do in your life that you can't currently do? Who would you inspire that maybe you worry you don't currently inspire? What impression would you leave on other people that maybe you feel you don't now? Start thinking about that. What is it that you really want? Because once you craft, in my Change Your Brain, Change Your Body program, we do a whole module just on visualization and creating a vision, really crafting this why for yourself, because it's so important and it's so powerful for a number of reasons. But one of them being this rewiring work we're talking about today. And so it's just, if you can just take some time, and this is an ongoing process. This isn't something you're going to do right in this moment, but spend some time now that you've watched this video over the next little while thinking about what is your why beyond just the weight loss, beyond just having more energy or avoiding health conditions like diabetes. Those are all great starts, but we want to go a little deeper, right? We want it to be a little more compelling. We want to create a really big, juicy, beautiful vision for the future we're creating for ourselves. So sink into that, spend some time with that. Think about what that would be for you. Because again, what that's going to do from a neuroscience perspective is it's going to force your brain to connect the healthy choice that brings you closer to that vision with that vision, right? Which now feels like a reward, which feels like something you want so much because you've really made it into this really clear, vivid, compelling vision for yourself, right? That starts to feel like a reward, like something your brain would want to move towards, right? So it's a great way to use your brain's natural wiring. Let's not fight our brain's natural wiring anymore, which is what dieting and deprivation and all of that does and why it is not successful. Don't fight it, right? If you can't beat them, join them. So instead, we're going to work with the way our brains are naturally wired, but we're going to do it in a way that works to our advantage and helps us get to our goals. So that's just a little bit. I mean, again, I teach a lot of things about reprogramming and rewiring your brain, but this is just a glimpse of what I mean when I talk about that. I realize that I sort of throw those terms around a lot, reprogramming and rewiring your old habits and patterns. But what does that really mean, and what does that really look like? So I just wanted to give you an example of that today, and I hope it helps. So go give those a try. Let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on this. If you feel like, I'd love to know if you feel like you need a little reprogramming and rewiring work in your brain, like if you're resonating with that. And also I would love to know, like, what's one habit? Tell me just one habit that you would really love to reprogram and rewire in your brain. Like, what's the number one thing that's getting in your way that you would love to work on? So let me know in the comments below, and I'll see if I can help you out, okay? Because I really believe, like I say, that this is the missing piece of the puzzle, and it's certainly what I've seen in the work that I've done with so many hundreds of students now, that for people that have spent years, decades dieting, trying every program, every exercise regimen, every shake, every bar, every book, everything, this tends to be the piece of the puzzle that they were missing. And once you kind of get this, it takes time, takes work. This is not a quick fix. But once you start doing this work and you start seeing the power of it and you start seeing the changes and how massive shifts start to happen, it's pretty compelling and it's pretty exciting. And it's something that you definitely want to continue. And it starts to bleed into other areas of your life, right? We start to see that we can start to do this reprogramming and rewiring work, not just in terms of our relationship with food, but in terms of so many other facets of our life. And that's one of my favorite things to see in the programs that I run. So let me know. I would love to know your thoughts below about this and where you are what's the habit that you're gonna start thinking about this with, okay? Have a good day. Bye.